Hello and welcome back to HEMA Fight Breakdowns. Today I want to talk about a cut that primarily exists in Fiore, but also has a little bit of a crossover to German called the Streichen. And I want to talk about it because I want to talk about it as a alternative option to the right Zwerchau. And I want to talk about that specifically because I believe they can both come from similar defended positions. They can also both come off of the same defense. And it's always important whenever you're fencing to have different reposts off of the same parry so that you can mix up your opponent and not get too predictable. So watching the clip, it's real short. It's just a basic short edge parry directly into a head cut. But what makes the Streichen special is its versatility and the fact that it comes from this long point position. So if you watch here, the fighter on the right, Dirtwechsel's under with their point, tries to get that offside stab. It gets pushed offline with that short edge cut. And from here, this is a position people find themselves in all the time. And it's a position that a lot of people would throw a Zwerchau from for a fairly obvious reason. Whenever you thrust and you miss, you're a little bit closer probably than you ever intend to be. And throwing a Zwerchau here would have the exact same targets available to it as you would the Streichen. The difference, though, is the directness that the Streichen takes from the position where it has successfully parried to the target. And what you want to pay attention to here is look at the speed at which this cut is thrown versus the defense is being pulled back. You'll notice that as this goes frame by frame, they happen at the exact same speed. And what's important to know is that if there was some extraneous motion here, as the hands would maybe raise up to here and then Zwerchau would come back in, there's a possibility that this person on the right could have pulled their defense back fast enough to defend the Zwerchau. So the first advantage that this really has is that it's so direct and it's so quick after it successfully blocks that you put yourself in an advantageous position where your opponent physically can't harm you now that they've missed. They have to pull their hands back even just to hit you back, let alone parry. And because your attack comes in at that same speed and that same distance, you can take advantage of whatever position you're in here to deliver that cut. And then while they're trying to realize that they have been cut, you can pull back and cover any follow-ups that might happen. Looking to another example of the same sort of thing, in this particular clip, we see the exact same Streichen, but this time the response cut goes to the hands. And the reason this is important to point out is that similar to the advantage it has over the Zwerchau from the position that we saw last time, which was more of a long point position, this Streichen comes from a Kron. Now, Kron pairing is something that a lot of people do, including myself, all the time to set up Zwerchaus. And again, for very good reason. Whenever somebody attacks you and they land in your Kron, there's a good chance that you can use the momentum of your arms going up over to the top of your head to just divert it and throw a Zwerchau to either side without your opponent being able to easily guess which one it is. Also, generally when people cut at you, as you saw here, the cut landed or would have landed, and this foot still has to travel and stop, many, many frames later before there is an opportunity to plant the foot and go backwards, which means the Zwerchau takes advantage of the increase of distance, or the decrease of distance, the stuck momentum, I guess you'd say. But the Streichen still has an advantage here over the Zwerchau, and it has to do with this particular part. So here the parry has been successful, but because it was a cut and not a thrust, the opponent on the left is well within their ability to just pull their hands back and put up a defense. Now, when you throw a Zwerchau to this position, and we'll just assume for the sake of argument that they threw a right Zwerchau, there's a good chance that this person could have just easily parried it. Zwerchaus from the right can go low, but they can really only target the hand. They can't really target the body unless you're very, very close. So if a right Zwerchau was thrown here, there's a good chance it would have landed in the crossguard of this person on the left. And that's a problem because when you throw a right Zwerchau especially, but even a left Zwerchau, you end up in a very unfavorable bind position. You end up in a position where you have to either reassert your tip very quickly and hope that you land it, or you're going to get grappled, or you're just going to be pushed down, basically. And that's because in order to throw a zwerch, to some extent, your hands have to be either at the level or a little bit higher than your tip. And I've talked about this in other zwerch videos, but basically, whenever you throw a zwerch and get parried, you're in a pretty bad position. However, if we want to assume here that this hand cut was parried, that would not have been nearly as terrible a position to be in. As you can see here, and we'll just assume for the sake of argument that that hand cut didn't land, they're still able, because you're not bound up and in a disadvantageous position, to pull your hands back and put up a cover for whatever it is your opponent would throw as a repost after defending themselves from your hand cut. So, just to be clear here, I'm not saying never throw a zwerch from either of these positions. What I am saying is that if you want a good loop, or I guess a flow chart of fencing to go off of, it's very important that you have multiple attacks to throw whenever you successfully parry from the exact same position, because that gives you the ability to pick and choose which repost you throw based on the minutia of the situation that you happen to be in when it lands. If people are getting really, really close to you, let zwerch all day. But if they're staying at range here and they're respecting that distance and they're not overcommitting to their strikes, the zwerch is probably not the best option. And if you've trained yourself over and over again to throw the exact same response every single time, you're basically going to put yourself in a losing position off of a very successful parry. And that's not what you want to have happen. So if you'd like to see your own footage featured on the channel, feel free to send me an email over at HEMAFightBreakdowns@gmail.com, and I hope to see you next time.